Hi everyone, I am Hanika Sikang and today I am about to discuss about the media communication during Philippine Republic or martial law era in 1972 to 1986. When Ferdinand Marcos imposed his dictatorship on 44 million Filipinos in September 1972 and abolished all democratic processes and civil liberties, among the first major victims to succumb were the press and the mass media. So when Ferdinand Marcos imposed his dictatorship on 44 million Filipinos, among the first major victims were the press and the mass media. Sila ang unang tinarget ni Marcos kasi Marcos knows kung anong role ng media sa society. On the eve of the proclamation of martial law, leading mass circulation dailies, weekly magazines and journals, radio and television stations were shut down by soldiers in gear. Thousands of journalists, editors, radio and television personnel were arrested and thrown into jail without due process. After the proclamation of martial law, pinashutdown ni Marcos lahat ng mga media administration and thousands of journalists, editors, radio, and television personnel were arrested and thrown into jail without due process. Kumbaga, diniretso lang sila sa kulungan nang di nila alam kung may kasalanan ba sila o wala.
Hello everyone, my name is Daniela Joy B. Wanilio and I am going to discuss all about the Upon his seizure of absolute power, Marcos issued a letter of instruction number 1, which ordered the press secretary and the secretary of the Department of National Defense or DND to take over and control all newspapers, magazines, radio, and television facilities, and all other media of communication. In the latter, Marcos states that engage in subversive activities against the government in the broadcast and dissemination of subversive materials and of deliberately stunted and overly exaggerated news stories and commentaries as well as false, willful, and other scurrilous statements and utterances clearly well-conceived, intended, and calculated to malign and discredit the duly constituted authorities and thereby promote the agitational propaganda, campaign, inspiratorial activities, and the legal ends of the Communist Party of the Philippines. So, Marcos controlled media, namely Canlaon Broadcasting System, Daily Express, and some Radio Philippine Network. Teodoro Lacsin Sr., a publisher of the Philippine Free Press, was arrested and imprisoned in the first week of martial law, along with Manila Times publisher Chino Rosas and several well-known journalists during martial law era. On the night of their arrest, the detainees were led to a room by Colonel Generoso Aleo, where they met by then Philippine Constabulary Chief Fidel V. Ramos, who told them, "Nothing personal, gentlemen. I was ordered to neutralize you. Please cooperate. We'll try to make things easier for you." So, how did people receive their information during all these shutdowns, right? Were all the media totally wiped out? Not quite. In fact, amidst the news outlets being sequestered, some are still allowed to continue running print issues and airing shows on the airwaves. These include the Philippine Daily Express, the Canlaon Broadcasting System, and several television channels. However, it is important to note that these remaining outlet medias all belong to Marcos cronies. Roberto Benedicto owned Canlaon and the Daily Express while greatly enjoying Marcos' favor as his appointed chairman of the Philippine National Bank ambassador to Japan, and head of the Philippine Sugar Commission. So, during 1974 of September 20, Marcos announces that there is no censorship at present. As chairman of the council, Mijares had the power to dictate and censor content in all forms of media. In change of heart, he confessed in a 24-page memo to U.S. South International Organization Subcommittee how he had aided Marcos in silencing media stories that exposed government abuses while fabricating others that would trumpet the administration's supposed successes. In the memo, Mijares specially discusses how Marcos created an atmosphere of danger to create the pretext for the declaration of martial law, including but not limited to having the military explode bombs during demonstrations, planting explosives in civilian areas which killed innocent bystanders, and threatening election personnel and members of the Constitutional Convention with violence. On the other hand, all this violence was blamed on the communists whom they allege had received special assistance from foreign powers to support a government takeover. The Media Advisory Council continued to play a vital role with martial law in full effect. In October 1972, when the Supreme Court was reviewing the factual basis for martial law, Mijares published a series of stories on new People's Army rebels amassing by the thousands in the hills around Manila. In December 1972, when Marcos got wind of opposition to his proposed constitution, Mijares also published articles attacking specific delegates and legislators as establishing the government in August 1973, when Marcos and his cronies could not get control of the Lepanto Consolidated Mining Company. Mijares also fabricated allegations of stock manipulation and fraud.
Hi guys, I'm Marjorie P. Balienas and I will be discuss the topic about the radio during the martial law. So the number of operational radio stations in Metro Manila decreased from 52 to 53, with 11 of the remaining stations being FM stations. The number of TV stations also dropped from 7 to 5. So the radio during the martial law was the number of radio station in Metro Manila went down from 52 to 53, with 11 of those being FM station. The number of TV station also decreased from 7 to 5. It shows how was media restricted that time. Media was restricted during the martial law to control the information, suppress dissent, and maintain the government power. Censorship and the closure of outlets were used to eliminate opposition and promote propaganda. So we have the Radio Veritas. Radio Veritas, operated by the Catholic Church, was the key source of breaking news during martial law, notably being the only station to report on Senator Ninoy Aquino's death and to provide live coverage of his funeral, despite government attempts to suppress media coverage. So Radio Veritas was an important source of news during a time when the government was controlling the media. Despite efforts to silence other news outlets, Radio Veritas managed to inform the public about significant events like Senator Ninoy Aquino's death and funeral. The next is the Radio Bandido. So after Radio Veritas was bombed, Radio Bandido continued broadcasting anti-Marcos campaigns. It was called Radio Bandido to prevent Marcos from tracking them down and destroying their facilities like with Veritas. Okay, after Radio Veritas was attacked, the Radio Bandido was created to keep broadcasting against the Marcos regime. They used a different name to stay hidden and safe from government retaliation. The last one is the Volts V. So there were no anime. Volts V was not allowed to air because it was deemed rebellious by the Marcos regime. The statement means during the time of the Marcos regime in the Philippines, the anime Volts V was not allowed to be shown on TV. The government believed the show had themes that could inspire rebellion or resistance against authority. So they banned it to maintain control and prevent dissent. Freedom of speech during the martial law. So, and in his ascent to power, Marcos was well aware of the role that the media played in society, and he exerted considerable effort to exercise control over it by shutting down competing voices and setting up a media outlet that was under his control. Marcos silenced public criticism and controlled the information that the people had access to. By doing so, Marcos had the final say in whatever passed for the truth. So this means that Marcos understood how important the media was in shaping people's opinions and thoughts. To maintain his power, he made sure to control the media by shutting down any sources that criticize him and creating his own media outlets that he could manage. By doing this, he controlled what information the public could see and hear, allowing him to decide what people believe to be true. So this way, he limited criticism and represented only the information that supported his view and action. So, in summarize, Marcos controlled the media to limit criticism and shape public opinion by shutting down opposing voices and creating his own media outlets, allowing him to control the information people receive. So that's all for my topic. Thank you.
Good morning everyone, I'm Joy Shalmoy. Today I'm going to discuss about student development. The student development during martial law in the Philippines in 1972 and 1986 was a powerful force of resistance against the Marcos regime. It was continuation of student activism that had been growing in the 1960s, fueled by concern about poverty, inequality, and corruption. Here's a key topics. Number 1 is free martial law activism. Student activism in the Philippines had a long history about intensified in 1960s events like a first quarter storm in 1970s and the Plaza Miranda bombing in 1971 showed the growing discontent with Marcos' rule. Second, the rise of underground activism. When the Marcos declared the martial law in 1972, traditional forms of dissent were silent. Organizations like Kabataang Makabayan or KM and the League of Filipino Students or LFS continued their fight for democracy and social justice. Number 3 is key figure and organizations. Prominent students leaders like Bonifacio Ilagan and Rene Sagisag emerged. Organizations like LFS played a critical role in organizing protest and raising awareness about human rights abuses. Number 4 is impact of the movement. The student movement kept the spirit of the resistance alive during martial law. They exposed the brutality and corruption of the Marcos regime, galvanizing public opposition and inspiring other sectors of society to join the fight for democracy. Number 5 is legacy of the movement. The student movement's sacrifice and unwavering commitments and to democracy were instrumental in the downfall of the Marcos regime. The power the people power revolutions of 1968, which culminated in the ouster of Marcos, was a testament to the power of peaceful resistance and enduring spirit of the student movement. Their legacy continues to inspire generation Filipinos to fight for justice, freedom, and democracy. And that's all for my report.
Entertainment education during martial law. On September 23, 1972, Ferdinand Marcos declared that the country would be placed under martial law, citing the numerous bombings and protests that were said to be influenced by the communists as justification for the proclamation. However, martial law is also remembered as a period where arts, particularly music, flourished. The former First Lady Imelda Marcos was known to have sponsored artists and provided recognition for their efforts, as well as encouraged the use of song to generate positive feelings amongst the public. And at the same time, music was a tool for protest and songs were used to draw attention towards national issues. And this is also the time where music by Filipino artists and groups increased in popularity in the early 1970s, and the musical genre known as Manila Sound emerged and flourished. Also, the Metro Manila Pop Music Festival was held annually from 1978 to 1985. Also helped launch the career of many artists including Freddie Aguilar. Although Aguilar did not win the festival, but his song Anak sold 30,000 copies on the first day of its release. In spite of the fact that the song was about the fate of children who do not heed their parents' advice, Anak resonated with state's nationalism, as martial law intended to suppress the radical student movement that were prominent in the late 90s. Anak fed into the Marcoses' fantasy of themselves as parents of a new nation that was being born out of the revolution from the center. Parents of a prodigal nation and its rebellious youth now returned to the fold. Aguilar's music expressed problems of the common folk, but since the music industry during martial law was monitored by the Broadcast Media Council, social criticism that dealt with ethical behavior and moral responsibility were not allowed. Even with the repressive conditions of martial law, the Filipinos music industry was able to grow and achieve a goal of degree popularity. Advocacy journalism during martial law. During martial law in the Philippines, particularly during the regime of Ferdinand Marcos, many advocacy journalists highlighted human rights abuses, including extrajudicial killings, torture, and forced disappearances. They worked to document these violations, often relying on testimonies from victims and their families. Also, advocacy journalism fostered solidarity among various sectors of society, including students, workers, and religious groups. Journalists collaborated with activists to raise awareness and mobilize protests against the regime. And that's it. Thank you.
Entertainment journalism during martial law in the Philippines is complex and multifaceted phenomenon. While sa pamamahala ni Marcos, he attempt to use entertainment as a tool for propaganda and distraction. Propaganda and distraction is like control entertainment, focus on light-hearted content, censorship of critical content. So, for those who artists and filmmakers found ways to express their dissent or hindi pagsang-ayon through this kind of underground channels, entertainment played a crucial role in cultural resistance and provide kang sense of hope and solidarity for those living under the regime or this kind of pamamahala. So, ang development of journalism during martial law in the Philippines is ginamarkahan nga grabe ang pag-control kato. So, it's like suppression and control is like closure of media, censorship, control of information. So, ang mga hindi agree kato is ginapahipos lamang. So, grabe ang pag-control during that time. So, may nagwa nga underground press or press freedom para sa katatagan or pagpapatibay ka mga journalist and importance of free independent media. So hasta kadya, ang legacy of martial law is continue to inform the fight for press freedom.